Hello, my name is Molly Gill, and welcome to this presentation tonight by FAMM. We're so glad that you could join us for this panel about the challenges to passing independent prison oversight in the states. I have a great panel with us here tonight, and I'm really excited about introducing them to you in a couple minutes. But I really just wanted to start by saying that this panel is so representative of the country. We have people from Virginia, Michigan, Arizona, Florida here with us tonight, all corners of the country, grappling with this question of how do we improve our prison systems? How do we make them more accountable? How do we make them more transparent? And there have been efforts underway in all of these states, plus some others around the country this year, to do exactly that. And tonight we're going to talk about those efforts. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that are coming up when people are trying to establish independent prison oversight. And we're going to talk about how we can hopefully overcome some of those challenges. But before we jump into all of that, I just wanted to provide some background and some context and explain, why does FAMM even care about independent prison oversight? We care about it because all day, every day, we hear terrible stories from our impacted families about the struggles that they're facing and that their loved ones are facing in prison. We hear about bad food, crumbling prison facilities, no heat, no air conditioning, no proper medical care, very limited programming for drug treatment, mental health treatment, job training. We hear about bad staff. We hear about understaffing that makes everybody in prison more dangerous and more susceptible to harm. So we hear these problems every single day. And because we are always trying to be responsive to incarcerated people and their loved ones, we have taken an interest in this question of how can we make prison conditions better through independent oversight to improve some of these things that we keep hearing about over and over again. And I should start by saying that when we talk about independent oversight, it's not about blaming prisons. It's not about blaming prison officials. It is about preventing and solving problems that are occurring in our prisons every day. So oversight isn't just for the good of incarcerated people and their families. Done right, oversight will make prisons better for the staff who work there too. So let's just start by defining some things. What do we even mean when we say that state prisons need independent oversight? What is oversight? Sounds like kind of a fancy, wonky word. Independent oversight, as we envision it, will achieve two goals: more transparency and more accountability in prisons. That's what this prison oversight legislation that's being introduced all around the country is about. And FAMM is supporting that legislation. We've written our own model of that legislation that's been introduced in several legislatures. And that is what we are hoping will be adopted. Now, increasing transparency and accountability in prisons through independent oversight, what that really means is we're talking about two things. We're talking about the power of someone who is not on the Department of Corrections payroll to go into the prisons anytime they want, to inspect facilities without announcing themselves first, to go in and see what is actually going on here on a normal day without giving the staff advance warning that they're coming, so the staff and people inside can't, take down the moldy shower curtains and, cover up the holes in the wall and put the best food in the kitchen. We want to know on a normal day when they don't know they're coming, what's it really like in there? Inspections can do that. Inspections can also shed light on what the real problems are in that situation. They can clear up misunderstandings. If the Department of Corrections is saying one thing, the best way to know if that's true is to go in and do an inspection and actually see with your own eyes whether that's true. Taxpayers deserve this kind of transparency because they're paying for corrections departments. Families deserve this kind of transparency because they're worried every day for their loved ones who are in these facilities. And lawmakers need this kind of transparency because lawmakers aren't able to visit prisons every day. Prisons operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. They need constant independent oversight Just one visit once a year by a committee or a group of lawmakers is not enough to keep these systems operating with accountability. So inspections can increase that transparency. They can also lead to more accountability. I think we all do a little bit better at work when we know that our boss could walk by at any minute and look over our shoulder and see what we're doing. So the other prong of oversight is investigations. Again, the idea is having objective outsiders. They're not on the Department of Corrections payroll. They're not answerable to the Department of Corrections. They are able to go in and investigate complaints that are coming up, the complaints we hear about every day. It is simply unbelievable to me that government agencies that cost billions of taxpayer dollars every single year and are accountable for tens of thousands of human lives have no independent oversight. You know, when a police officer shoots someone, the public is right to be upset by that and to ask what went wrong. And when that investigation is done by someone inside that police department, paid by that police department, the public is also right to be skeptical about the results of that investigation. These investigations that we're talking about with independent oversight would be done by people who are, again, not working at the Department of Corrections, not answerable to them, answerable to the public. And we think that those investigations would help prevent problems. They would solve problems. They would help people inside understand that there's a place they can go for help if everything else fails them inside those prison systems, which is what we hear is often happening. So that is what we're talking about when we are talking about independent prison oversight. So let's turn to our panelists today. They're going to tell us more about their efforts in their states. And I'm going to start with Vishal Agraharkar from the ACLU of Virginia. We're so glad that Vishal is here with us. The ACLU of Virginia has really been leading the way in the state. They've been engaged in a very long, drawn-out lawsuit with the state's Department of Corrections over the use of solitary confinement in state prisons. And I'm hoping that they'll tell us a little bit more about that too tonight. So thanks so much for being here, Vishal. Also from Virginia tonight, we have Pauletta James. She's a co-founder of the Sisters in Prison Reform, which is a Virginia group of women working to reform sentencing laws and prison policies. And Pauletta is the wife of Jerry James, who has served 20 years of a 38-year sentence in the Virginia prison system. So she can offer us tonight the perspective of a family member who has to deal with the Department of Corrections every day. Thanks so much for being here, Pauletta. I'm really happy that we have John Fabricius back with us. John is the executive director and founder of Arizonans for Transparency and Accountability in Corrections, which is a nonprofit organization that is working to establish independent oversight in Arizona. And John served 15 years in the Arizona State Prison System himself, so he knows how that system works pretty well. Thanks, John, for being here. We also have Lois Polano with us. Lois is the founder and executive director of Citizens for Prison Reform, which is a nonprofit group that supports the families of incarcerated loved ones in Michigan state prisons. Lois also helped establish a family advisory board that meets with the Department of Corrections regularly to hear the concerns of families, and she can tell us more about what's going on in Michigan with oversight currently. Finally, we have Denise Rock, the founder and executive director of Florida Cares, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates sentencing and prison reform and mobilizes the families of incarcerated loved ones in the Sunshine State. And Denise can tell us about some of the innovative work that she's doing with their Department of Corrections down there. So again, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I think this is going to be a great discussion, and I really want to hear what everyone has to say. So I'm just going to dive right into it and do sort of this first question. We'll do like a round robin. We'll just go around the room, and everyone let me know. I'd like to start by asking you what, in your opinion, are the one or two biggest problems in your state's prison system right now? And how could independent oversight help address these problems? And I'll start off with, we'll go to Vishal first.
Sure. Thanks, Molly, and thanks to all my co-panelists and everyone who's watching. So I'm at the ACLU of Virginia, and We do a lot of litigation, but also other kinds of advocacy in Virginia and around prison issues, but lots of other issues. And we're a pretty small team, so there's only so much we can do. So one of the things that we do is get intakes from people around the state that can touch on our issue areas. And by far the kind of largest source of intakes are from people who are incarcerated, facing all kinds of issues in prisons and jails, and most of those come from the Virginia prison system. So, and there's only so much we can do in response, and part of that is bringing lawsuits like the one that you mentioned. I would say that probably the biggest problem that I think Oversight could really address in Virginia is that it's just really hard, based on kind of what we're hearing from these intakes and what we've seen. It can be really hard for people to have their legitimate problems considered and addressed by people who actually have an incentive to address them. Because there's no independent agency that kind of does that oversight function in Virginia. By and large, the task of kind of looking at these allegations of abuse or other problems in the system is left pretty much to DOC itself. And of course, they don't have a strong incentive to hold themselves accountable. And we routinely see or perceive them taking kind of steps to avoid accountability, especially when it's about allegations of mistreatment or abuse of incarcerated people. And I don't think that that's unique to Virginia. I think that's just kind of a natural thing if you're kind of left to oversee yourselves. So we rarely kind of see employees or higher ups disciplined for allegations of abuse. They're often allegations are just very rarely credited by the people who are in charge of investigating them. They're often discredited. And there seems to be this focus on ensuring that they're not sued as opposed to anything else. So one of the few avenues that there are that are left in terms of oversight are private lawsuits, and that's kind of where we and a few other groups and attorneys come in. But there are a number of reasons why that isn't really an effective. It's not a substitute for oversight. Lawsuits are not efficient way to address problems generally, but in the prison context, it's especially hard to even get in the courthouse door, and that's for a few reasons. One is a federal law called the Prison Litigation Reform Act that imposed all kinds of barriers to lawsuits against prison officials. For example, incarcerated people have to go through every stage of the prison grievance procedures in order to even kind of bring a suit, or it's automatically dismissed, or they're forever kind of barred from bringing a lawsuit on that issue. The same law limits the kinds of relief that you can get and the amount of kind of fees that attorneys can recover as compared to other civil rights lawsuits that are not in prisons. And so it's hard to find an attorney who's even willing to look at your case unless they agree pretty much to do it for free. And then even if you are able to bring a lawsuit, there are all kinds of problems that people who are incarcerated face in proving up their claims. You don't have access to many records. You often don't have a way of kind of recording some of the problems that you're facing, unlike in the outside world where you might have a smartphone and other ways to kind of capture evidence. Your statements just are often just given less credence by people, by juries and judges than the correctional officers, and you're often litigating it yourself because you don't have an attorney, and so there are all kinds of barriers come up that way. And there are many more in that law that I could get into if I had more time. But in addition to kind of just being hard to bring lawsuits against a prison, it's another reason why lawsuits are not a good substitute for oversight is that kind of the threat of lawsuits, it often doesn't incentivize DOC to address the underlying problems so much as just make it harder for people to file lawsuits in the first place. And they can do that in a number of ways. You can make it harder for people to kind of check every box of the prison grievance procedures, which are often incredibly complicated and sometimes very difficult to understand. And if you get tripped up on any part of that, you're forever barred from bringing a lawsuit on that issue. You can make it hard for people to get records, including their own records. And we've seen that over and over again when we represent people. And then there's just a culture of kind of ensuring that no one is held accountable, like whether you call it the blue wall of silence or whatever else. Can make it hard to learn what really happened. And there's also, we hear lots of reports of retaliation against people who complain or who are seen as jailhouse lawyers who want to kind of cause trouble. And that can also further deter people from even trying to get their problems fixed. So having no independent oversight, having to rely on essentially just private lawsuits and is just a huge barrier that I think an independent agency with real kind of powers to look at what's actually going on and make recommendations as to problems that are happening would be a huge boon in Virginia, based on what we know.
Oversight should be preventing these lawsuits from arising in the first place, right? The idea is if you see a problem and you bring everyone's attention to it, you can fix it before it turns into a lawsuit, which also is very expensive for the state. The state of Virginia is paying, maybe millions of dollars in attorney's fees, defending lawsuits of this kind. So I want to stay in Virginia for a minute and switch over to Pauletra. And, from a family perspective, what do you see as the sort of number one, problem in prisons that families are dealing with, and how might oversight help with that?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Molly, for having me. And thank you to all the co-panelists as well as everyone watching. So from a family perspective, the two biggest issues that I know I deal with, and I know I see a lot of conversation in groups that families deal with, is the medical care as well as living conditions. Because oftentimes, families are calling facilities, when they've heard that something may have happened to their loved one, or their loved one is reaching out to them saying they have these situations or things going on, and they've put in, the medical requests, and they're on day 3, day 5, day 7, sometimes months, and not getting a response, and calling their family members, asking their family to call the facility and see if they can kind of help, expedite things for them. So medical care and, again, the living conditions are probably the two biggest ones, because as we are getting ready to go into our summer, we still have a lot of facilities here in Virginia that does not have AC. As you know, you've got hundreds of guys in a building. It's going to get hot. These men and women are left to try and cool themselves down with ice or the fans. And oftentimes, they don't even have access to fans. So those are kind of the two biggest issues from a family perspective that I see as an issue. And, I think independent oversight will help to get those problems resolved, have investigations done as to what the delay is, what the problem is, what is taking so long, and also to help get the facilities that don't have air conditioning, the resources that they need, because we know that the money is there, the money is available. So why isn't that money being used for what it was purposed?
Thanks, Pauletra. That's a really important point. Medical care, everyday need. That's a problem where you can have a problem every single day. And again, like a lawsuit just isn't going to be a solution to that. You need someplace you can go where you can get a rapid and meaningful response. So let's go to Lois and talk about Michigan. And what do you see as sort of a big problem there, and how oversight might help?
Yes, well, definitely we see all of these things that have already been mentioned. But I think in looking at the real root of the problem, it's the toxic culture, it's the need for culture shift, and the lack of meaningful training for staff. If we could begin to fix those two things, I think we could address many of the other issues. And one of the ways that we're hoping to build into our oversight legislation is that all of those living and working inside of the prisons should be surveyed. They should have the opportunity to have their voices heard and to complete a survey, and that should not be overseen or go to the Department of Corrections. So we are writing that in, that is something that would occur, and then those results would go to our ombudsman's office, and for them to analyze and to really just look at what we have going on inside from the perspective of those that are directly impacted.
That's a good point. Yeah, sort of a feedback. The oversight office can act as a kind of feedback mechanism that's less biased and has a better culture than what we're seeing in prisons in terms of hearing concerns. Denise, tell us about Florida. If you got one thing that's you could fix and how oversight might be helpful there.
Well, all of the things they mentioned all exist in Florida as well. I think the one thing that a lot of this comes down to is lack of communication or poor communication with DOC. And I think that is one area that we can all do better in, and working with DOC in that regard for things like their medical issues, living conditions. A lot of times just having the conversation or putting out there what's going on at an institution, for example, I think would be a great help.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I hear so many stories all the time about people who are calling prisons and they can't even get someone to pick up the phone. Yeah. So, something even as basic as that is a place where oversight could make such a difference. John, I'm going to have you wrap it up and tell us a little bit about Arizona and how oversight might help out there.
There we go. Yeah, Arizona is definitely a model for everything that could possibly go wrong in a prison situation. It's manifest in the Arizona Department of Corrections, and we're right now in a process where we've had a massive class action suit that's gone on for years, and it's unprecedented in its scope and what it's doing. The relief that it's seeking, and the relief that it's seeking presently, this is a lawsuit where the state of Arizona was found in contempt twice, and this is based on healthcare, the overuse or erroneous use of solitary confinement and mental health care in the Arizona Department of Corrections, which is absolutely abhorrent. So the lawsuit, the state of Arizona was found in contempt twice and fined by the federal court, fined $1.1 and then $1.3 million consecutively for those contempt findings. And this is after the state entered into a settlement that they wanted the plaintiff class to enter into. They requested the settlement. They failed on all their metrics, and they did it deliberately and intentionally. And it was clearly a dilatory act to keep kicking the can down the road. So that's a massive issue here. And so we're waiting right now for a federal judge to hand down a decision, which is probably going to sever out the healthcare system from the Department of Corrections and put it in receivership, most likely. It's as bad as it can get out here in Arizona. And every situation that we have, like that was enumerated so far by the co-panelists and by you, Molly, at the beginning, is extant here in Arizona. And what we did see through this ACLU lawsuit, this plaintiff lawsuit, was that when there was part of the settlement was those inspections, like you were stating at the beginning, Molly, about what an ombudsman would be able to do, or an oversight person would be able to do, is come in and get those inspections. They were able to do that in limited fashion because of the lawsuit and because of the settlement that was entered. And when they did, the images that the ACLU attorneys were able to pull out of the Department of Corrections were just absolutely, just heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, and it turned the public it informed the public about exactly what is going on in our Department of Corrections. So we need full-scale independent oversight of the Department of Corrections. In Arizona, we have 10 major complexes that are throughout the state, and and there's a centralized Department of Corrections administration in downtown Phoenix. So these places are fiefdoms of their own. They're complexes with 7,000 people on them that are run as their own independent fiefdoms, and their crumbling infrastructure, lack of services, everything that you could list is in systemic failure in the Arizona Department of Corrections. People are dying, people are getting injured, all kinds of things. And so we can't get oversight in Arizona fast enough, and we need it as soon as we possibly can. And, and you're right, lawsuits can't do it. And even this lawsuit, which is probably going to kick most of the healthcare system into receivership, even that brings up a number of issues, and we're constantly in this cycle of chasing a solution because we don't have that independent oversight, and because we're not dealing with these issues substantively like we should. We're dealing with them as symptoms instead of as at the cause of these things. So that's what we got going on in here in Arizona.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, these are some really disturbing stories, years of litigation in courts over things like whether you can keep a person in how long you can keep a person in solitary confinement in Virginia, whether you're going to get quality healthcare in Arizona. These are life or death issues, and they're impacting people every single day. So I will say, thinking as an advocate too, I know I've done some work in Arizona with you, John, and I know one of the things that I would appreciate independent prison oversight for as an advocate is, honestly, sometimes you just don't know whether the Department of Corrections is telling the truth. And there can be so much mistrust built up over years and years and years of working with these agencies that you really just kind of hold them in a state of constant skepticism. And so independent oversight can also serve as sort of a reconnaissance team, an information gatherer. They can actually go and get the facts, and from an objective source, you can get the truth, as opposed to, having to trust an agency that may have a very long history of being untrustworthy. So, putting our advocate caps on, because we're all advocates, I do want to talk about, we're not just watching these prison problems happen. All of us are advocating for independent prison oversight. We all want the accountability and the transparency that we're talking about. So what have been the sort of, I would say, just maybe focus on one obstacle you have encountered while you're talking to lawmakers about oversight, trying to pass this legislation, or even talking to stakeholders, talking to people, like in the governor's office, the Department of Corrections office, explaining to them what this is. What are some of the objections and the obstacles you're encountering? And maybe everybody just pick one and, sort of say it quickly, and then we'll keep sort of digging down on that. And I'm going to go in reverse order. We'll start with John this time and go back to Vishal.
I think the short answer is politics. I don't think, and I'd be willing to be disabused of this, but I believe Virginia, Florida, and Arizona are the last three states in the country that subscribe to the truth in sentencing model, or the 85% model. I don't think that the fact that the three of our states are in this conversation is any mistake, and that has to come with the political culture in the state. And so the short answer to me is politics, and the fear mongering that happens, and the ability to manipulate lawmakers inside their party, and nobody wants to be Michael Dukakis, right? And so these things are serious problems, and it sometimes can be intractable.
Thanks, John. Let's see. I think I went to Denise next.
Sure. I would say that the biggest obstacle is just the word oversight. The word oversight. Does anyone want to be overseen, for example? And so we have that language that just automatically, clenches people up. And so we've been stopped there with legislators. And, once we start to explain to them what this really is, then it looks different to them in what we've termed it. And recognizing that the inspector general, which we have an inspector general here, most people say, oh, the inspector general does that. Inspector general does not do, deal with food issues, tablet issues, mental health, heating issues, lack of heating issues, those sort of things. So there's so much more that can be done in an oversight effort. So
it's a really great point. I'm so glad you bring that up, because even here at FAMM, talking to our own members, oversight, like I said, is kind of a weird word, and people don't necessarily know what you mean when you say it. And we've encountered that with lawmakers as well. They say, well, what do you mean oversight? What is that? What does that look like? And so I think sort of fleshing it out for people. I think the fact that there are some internal oversight offices in some state departments of corrections already can actually be counterproductive. They say, oh, oversight, we've already got that. We have our own oversight office. And they're sort of missing the point that, yeah, but they're on your payroll. They work for you. We're talking about someone who doesn't work for you, who's going to be objective, who isn't beholden to you. And so even explaining that concept, and I think also a word that we often use is, the ombudsman, the oversight ombudsman, the corrections ombudsman. And that's another sort of weird word. People don't necessarily know what it means. And also some of these systems, like I said, they already have an internal ombudsman or an internal inspector general. And so they're saying, what's the problem here? We already do this. So yeah, I think finding ways to define these terms, make them a little more friendly. I think all of that is stuff that I'm thinking hard about as an advocate. And I think all of us probably need to think about more too. Let's see, I think I went to Lois next.
So I'm going to say really being unaware and uneducated, all of our state leadership. And also what you're saying, Molly, is that I'm hearing, well, we already have our ombudsman's office, and we already have oversight legislative committees, and therefore we're providing oversight. Yet they never do inspections or investigations. A lot of them have never even been to a prison, and they're thinking that's oversight. So I think education and unawareness, just being unaware.
Yeah, I second that. I think that's so right in my encounters with, lawmakers as well. This is why FAMM has been, pushing lawmakers to go visit prisons. And we have a Visit a Prison campaign, which we're going to be relaunching soon. And, you don't know unless you go. And it's amazing how few lawmakers have ever set foot inside of a prison. And so we often hear them say a lot of just frankly ignorant and uneducated things because they don't know any better, and they haven't seen it with their own eyes. So that is definitely work that us advocates have to do. We have to help them fill that gap. So turning to you, Pauletra, what are your thoughts?
So I definitely echo what, both John and Lois have said, is that, politics as well as being uneducated about it. But I also think fear of what will be exposed, fear of what will come out, and recognizing that they may have to go back and accept the recourse of, what they've overlooked and what they refuse to see because they're walking around with blinders.
Yeah, that's a spot on. Absolutely. I've even heard people say, well, we don't want oversight because you tell us oversight will prevent lawsuits, but we think it will cause more lawsuits. We think they'll come in there and they'll see more things that people can sue us about. We've actually heard that. And I mean, that's such a sad commentary to me because you shouldn't be operating a prison system that is fodder for lawsuits. So Vishal, we'll go back to you and finish up here.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said and Pauletra's comments. I think that, as a result of that fear, including fear of lawsuits, and just oversight generally, we get a lot of opposition from the DOC, which often kind of concretely takes the form of inflated fiscal impact statements. In Virginia, the DOC, or if you're going to pass a bill that is affecting an agency, they go to that agency and ask, well, how much is this going to cost to implement? And so the DOC is able to kind of put together their own estimates, which, in this case was just really out of whack from what we see nationally. And so then we have to deal with that because legislators show a great degree of deference often to DOC and kind of including with respect to those cost estimates. And so that has been a very kind of concrete obstacle that we faced.
Well, I'm going to use your example to transition to our next question because I know how the story ends, but also, what are some of the ways that you've seen in Virginia that you've been able to overcome that specific objection about, this is just going to cost too much?
Yeah, sure. And I know you were, very kind of integral part of this, but, the first year that this bill was introduced in Virginia, as a result of the kind of $11 million cost estimate, the legislature did what it often does to kind of kill a bill, but in this case, we thought it was somewhat kind of genuine. They wanted to know what it would actually cost, and so they sent it over to a study group, and they kind of hired in the off season with the legislature that a consultant was hired to kind of look at some of those costs, and to their credit, they actually spoke to a wide range of stakeholders, including us and many other people, to kind of get a sense of like what oversight might look like and what it might cost, and came up with a cost estimate that was much more reasonable, and a few different options, and one of which we thought actually looked like the kind of bill that we wanted to pass, and ended up being about $1.5 million, so almost a tenth of what the DOC had estimated. And we made the point the next legislative session that this was 0.1% of the annual $1.5 billion budget of the DOC. So it was about $1.6 million of ongoing costs, and so it was really 0.1% of the DOC's budget would fund an entire new office that would provide oversight over that agency, and that very large amount of money, make sure that it was being spent in a way that was wise.
I think that's a really good example of how you overcame that obstacle, and but it also makes the point that you had to do that happened over the course of 2 legislative sessions. So it took time. That didn't happen overnight. So overcoming some of these can take some real time. I think cost is a huge factor in my experience working in state legislatures. Is they want to know how much is this going to cost, and also why is this worth it? Why should we spend $1.5 million every year? Another obstacle that I think we have to overcome is I think particularly in some more conservative sort of small government states where maybe they have a really lean government, you have the issue of why are we creating more government bureaucracy? What's another agency actually going to do? Is this really worth it? And I think we're still struggling to sort of quantify the value of oversight. A lot of it feels kind of hypothetical. Oh, you'll avoid lawsuits, but you can get the rejoinder of, well, yeah, maybe they're going to discover more things that will get us sued. And so it's very, I do think this cost and bureaucracy argument is very complicated. I like what you said, Vishal, about using sort of a percentage of the overall budget as a sort of measuring rod for what oversight costs. That's something that we're investigating here at FAMM quite a bit as we're thinking more about this issue, is really even perhaps writing the budget that, writing a bill that says the budget for this office is a certain percentage of the entire DOC's budget. And then you're also tying it to the DOC's budget, which is always growing. And so that office's budget will benefit from some of that growth as well. But let's keep focusing on Huron. I'm curious what others have done to sort of overcome some of these obstacles that you're encountering. And I'm going to go to Denise because yours was essentially about messaging, and labeling. So tell us how you've started thinking about overcoming that obstacle.
Sure. So we did a couple things. The first is with this word oversight and that, just everybody tensing up there. We started to think about how could we kind of, fix that? How can we make it happier? It's kind of hard to make that happier, but and we came up with the word a collaborative board. And when we did that, we noticed with legislators, first of all, they had no idea what a collaborative board is. And they were like, what is that? Whereas an oversight kind of seems like somebody bearing down on someone. And we started to realize that was opening the door, at least legislatively, for conversation. And we've been able to find bill sponsors and have conversations with other legislators as a result. I think for some families or people that are incarcerated, when you first hear that, you're like, I don't want to be no collaborative board. I don't want to work with them. I want to get rid of the bad people. And so there's that with the families. But when you start to understand what things we have in common with one another, we really do have something in common with DOC. DOC does not want their employees to, kill, harm, or do illegal activities inside their institutions. And we don't want them to either. So we do have a collaborative effort to make it a better place. And that was one thing that has worked really well for us. The other thing that's worked really well for us is we have an inspector general here. So a lot of people say, well, the inspector general does that. And so making a clear point that the inspector general does not deal with, disciplinary reports or phones and, lack of food or medical care and those sort of things. And that helps our legislators understand that there is really a need for some type of oversight. We also decided just to go ahead and hold ourselves out there as a collaborative board. And so, we started to develop a system where incarcerated people or their loved ones could report in something that was going on or with them individually, and we would contact the Department of Corrections and try to resolve that issue. It helps us to keep track of what's happening inside the institutions. So we're aware of where there are problems, and that has led to just being able to have more, we have data. We have data on how many, we may not be accurate, but you can't say there are, no problems at this institution, because we're going to bring them to you and show you what they are. You're muted, Molly.
Thanks. What you're saying is transitioning so well into a question I wanted to ask you later that I'm just going to ask it now, which is, along with this idea that, there's sort of messaging obstacles, going to John's point that sometimes there are just political obstacles. And in Florida, you have a legislature that, as far as I can tell, just does not seem to care about prisons at all. And you seem to have a governor who doesn't really care that much either. And so it just seems, and I don't think you're alone in this. I think there are people in other states or around the country who are saying, like, what do you do to establish oversight if you have a government that just doesn't care and they're not going to do it? What do you do in that situation? And Denise, right now, I know you're working on, some sort of creative ways to sort of do oversight without having to, go through the legislative process. And just tell us a little bit about what you've got in the works and what you're hoping to see from that.
Sure. So for us, I think we have a leadership problem. The governor and the leadership are not interested in sentencing reform, prison conditions, or anything like that. But I do think that some of our newer legislators are interested. We've definitely gotten a lot of them that will visit a prison, or if we contact them about an issue that needs to be where we need somebody in that facility to look at someone or handle something, that they will go there. So that developing those contacts has been excellent. We've also reached out to the new Secretary of the Department of Corrections and began working with him and have quarterly meetings scheduled with him. And hopefully we'll be able to develop some quarterly town halls for, the entire state. But right now we do have quarterly meetings with him. And I would say that, at the very least, he's receptive. He's heard what we would envision this as, and from there, we then contact the wardens on issues. And one of the things that I do in all of my emails to the wardens is I just include a little paragraph to them that lets them know. It says, Florida Cares is a nonprofit dedicated to improving the lives of the incarcerated. One of the ways we accomplish this is through a collaborative effort to transcend the turmoil that exists between administration, staff, officers, prisoners, and families. All communications with this regard are confidential and will not be copied to media or any person other than a legislator if necessary. I know this goes far because we use media for things, but if we are going to make a collaborative effort to try to resolve a problem, this little disclosure, I've had wardens that have emailed me back and said, I like this. Okay. And they will tell me, we did this wrong, we messed up on this, and we're fixing this. And I feel like we have movement from that. And this doesn't say that we'll never tell someone from the media. If we tell a legislator and the legislator does something about it, then that would be their decision. But for us, we see this as just the opportunity to try to fix the problem, get ahead of a problem if we see a problem that exists. And again, it is part of a collaborative effort to make everybody's lives in the Department of Corrections better.
Thanks for sharing that. Lois, I know you got a family advisory board, not an oversight board or an ombudsman, but an advisory board established in Michigan, which sounds a little bit similar to what Denise is cooking up in Florida. And Lois, you mentioned that ignorance, of course, is one of the biggest obstacles there. Michigan's a little bit unique. You guys do have some oversight to an extent, but I know you want more. And so, tell us about how you're attempting to do that and, how you're trying to overcome the obstacles that you've mentioned there.
Yeah, so I hate to admit it, but I had not actually read our Michigan compiled law, and I did not know or understand the powers that our ombudsman has had for many years. He's been in office this time around. He's been there since 2009. So he's a long-term ombudsman. And as we started now reviewing this, and we're very new into all of this, and we are drafting legislation, building out the powers and the authority under the current ombudsman's. One of the things that we are doing is meeting with him and as well Disability Rights Michigan, who again has the authority to go in on and out. So we meet monthly to discuss some of the major issues and general issues that we have going on and how we can work to collaborate along with them in a better way. But I think it's really been eye-opening reading our Michigan compiled law. And we see many things that can definitely be strengthened and changed. The power of our current ombudsman's office. There are many places where it says may do this, may do that, needs to be changed to shall. And there is really no reporting in place there. So there's a lot of changes that need to be made with that. But in 3 years ago, we received funding through Unlock the Box and began an Open My Door campaign to address the use of solitary confinement in Michigan. And at that time, we requested data from the department, and that was given to me in large part because of the Family Advisory Board and the work that we have done to build that relationship with the Department of Corrections. And we have been able to bring change through that board. And we've also been able to note and log many issues that have been going on for years. And we have learned a lot more of what's going on. So that's all been good. But we were able to get detailed data out. And with that data, we were able to create a report. We interviewed over 50 families. And then we also put together an issue brief on how this is a public health crisis. So utilizing the data, research, evidence-based research, we have been able to really bring awareness through these measures, but as well, we have gone back and tracked and have gotten documentation, photos, MDOC reports and documents out of individuals who have died inside. And we take and share those photos and that information with legislators. And I don't care which side of the aisle they're on, the response is always the same. Well, that's not Michigan. That didn't happen here in Michigan, did it? And so while I hate to have to share those types of graphics, I am finding that it may take that to call them to do something different.
Well, that's a great, segue to, I want to go back to John here, because you were talking about politics or, maybe the biggest obstacle to overcome. And I think sometimes it is just sincerely waiting for new leadership to get elected.
Sure.
But lawmakers are responsive to the news and to headlines. And, just as Lois's lawmakers don't like hearing about people dying inside state prisons, and they don't like seeing that data, I'm sure lawmakers in Arizona are not happy seeing their prison system all over the, cover of the, state newspaper every week because of this lawsuit that just keeps dragging on and on with all of the horror stories attached to it. So, John, what do you think how can we leverage politics to get oversight moving, especially in these really tough places?
Yeah, well, I think you've hit on a number of issues. I mean, fortunately, here in Arizona, we've got a we've got a news media that has been working on these issues, and there's a particular journalist here in Arizona that's working for our largest newspaper that's been on the prison beat for a while, Jimmy Jenkins, and he has done incredible work to bring these issues to light. But moreover, I think that when we're talking about the politics and what I was referencing earlier, which is that, not a lot of people win office by being perceived as being soft on crime, which can be whether it's a perception or a reality or within a political body or a political party or ideation. The reality is that is an impediment to progress. And so one of the things that we've tried to do out here is to engage the staff. And that was something that you had talked about, Molly, when in your introductory statement, is that these are living conditions for the incarcerated, but these are working conditions for the staff. And if you can get the staff on this issue, and we've had some success with that here in Arizona, going through the correctional labor unions, and get them talking about these issues as well, because that's a whole different metric to politicians, right? Those are people that are talking about work conditions, and they're walking in and out. We've got about 10,000 staff members walking in and out of prisons on a day in, day out basis here in Arizona, and and their families and their community members. And like I said, here in Arizona, anyways, our 10 prisons are in small rural communities. And some of these communities are entirely prison communities, where there's one here in Arizona, Florence, that has both state, federal, and private facilities in it. So the whole community is based off of prisons. And so when you have lawmakers that are representing these, and generally in these rural communities, it's generally the more conservative and Republican legislators. And so when they start hearing from their constituents, the people that are working in these prisons, and they're hearing the same stories that are being echoed in the newspapers and that are being echoed by the families of the incarcerated and by the organizations that work on this every day, it starts to land with lawmakers. And we have seen some unlikely people, unlikely politicians come and approach us and say, reach out to ATAC and say, I want to work on this issue, or have been receptive where they have not been receptive before. And so leveraging politics is a matter of getting to these organic constituencies, getting them educated on the issue, and getting those ones that are directly impacted, whether they're the formerly the incarcerated, their families, and or the staff members, and getting these people to reach out to their lawmakers and socialize this issue to the legislature. I think that's integral to getting that done and getting over some of these impediments.
I really appreciate those comments, John, and I agree with you. I think that's spot on. I think with so many prison issues, it's really tempting and easy to frame it as a sort of us versus them framework. It's the incarcerated people against the staff. And, this is an issue where it can't be like that. This is a win-win situation. Everyone benefits from oversight. Right. Everyone, whether you're working at a prison or living in a prison. And so I think you're right, like John, going out and getting those constituencies on board. And, even listening to what did they want? Maybe there's some specific funding that you can add to your oversight bill for something that the corrections staff want. Right. Why not? If that, why not build, some of this goodwill with the other side and bring them into our corner and make them an advocate for our effort, because there's something in it for them too. So I think you're right. I think that can change the political dynamic. I think, it's pretty cynical, but sometimes true to say that lawmakers just don't care about incarcerated people, but they do seem to care more about correctional staff and government employees, especially when they're in big blocks and when they have powerful unions. And so, maybe if they don't care about incarcerated people and their families, we need to go find some people that they do listen to a little bit more and bring those people onto our team and find a way to do that. Exactly. So I'm so sad we have run out of time, and I just really want to thank you again all for coming out and doing this. And before we wrap up, I want to give each of you a chance to just put in a plug for your organization, because all of you are at the helm of organizations doing really important work at the state and local level. And I think there are some people watching from your states who might want to get connected with you. So I'm going to start with Vishal and run through the list there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Molly. This has been a great event, and it's nice to get connected with so many people around the country working on kind of similar issues. We're, ACLU Virginia works on a lot of different issues, and prison work is definitely a big part of it. For those watching in Virginia, we can urge you all to get involved on this issue and contact legislators. We really think that, on all sides of the political spectrum, there is interest in this, and it's just we've only been kind of in this effort for a couple of years, which is not that long of a time for a major piece of legislation like this. And we think that we can get it over if we can get kind of support from people and kind of reaching out to the right legislators. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishal. And staying in Virginia, Palitra.
Yes, thank you, Molly. Thank you to all the co-panelists. And I'll just, echo on something John had said. Just as we family members want our loved ones to be kept safe and to come home safe and to make it out of serving their time for, whatever reason that they were incarcerated, we want to see those workers there make it home to their families. And that's the mindset that they have as well. They want to go to work, do their job, and they want to go home. And so I agree, Molly, we want that safety for both sides, not just for those that are in the facility, but those that work at the facility. So we definitely need to find a way to draw those that work in the facility to our side in order to really get this type of legislation through our, Senate and legislators, so that they have an understanding that it's not us against them. We want to do this like, Denise said, the collaborative effort, that's what we want. We want this to be a collaborative effort for both sides.
Thanks, Palotra. And everyone, make sure you go visit the Sisters in Prison Reform website and check them out. They're doing great work. Let's see. We'll go to Denise in Florida next.
Sure, thanks. So if you are in Florida and you go to our website, floridacarescharity.org, right across the top, you'll see a yellow bar and it says report a prison concern or help ticket. That is the first step to our collaborative board. And we see a lot of things that get posted in Facebook, and people are, someone just got killed at this prison, or this prison is on lockdown. And when we put it in Facebook and we put it as these comments, it's all just sort of venting. When you put it in on that yellow bar across our website, it is being tracked. Maybe there is nothing we can do at this point as far as, if someone has died, there's not a whole lot, that we can do other than report it to an authority, but it is being tracked. And in that being tracked, we believe that will lead to legislation that will improve everybody's lives that are incarcerated. So we urge you, if you're in Florida, to use that system in addition to anything that you would be posting on Facebook or in the internet.
So go visit Florida Cares' website, Florida folks. Don't just complain on Facebook. That's what Denise is saying. Lois, tell us about your work and how people can get connected to you.
Yes, so Citizens for Prison Reform, we have a family participation program where we support, assist, and walk alongside families, addressing their concerns directly with the Department of Corrections. So we have posters hung in 15 prisons where individuals inside can take tear-off sheets and send them out to their families and get connected. We have support meetings. The Family Advisory Board continues to meet, and we take all of these concerns that we hear from families, address them through the Family Advisory Board. That has now become a bill, and the Department of Corrections was mandated to create a family reunification policy. So that is in the middle right now of being completed, and the board will then be permanent under that reunification policy. As well, again, 3 years ago, we received the funding for the Open My Door campaign to address the use of solitary confinement in Michigan prisons, jails, and juvenile detention facilities. And we have a separate website for Open My Door. We really would love to invite anybody who's on from Michigan to our Legislative Education Day, April 27th, where we will have 2 model solitary cells, confinement cells. One of them will be on the Capitol lawn. And we will be meeting with legislators. And our next step is to really start getting supporters and sponsors for this oversight legislation that we have worked to draft.
Thanks so much, Lois. You're doing so much great work there. And I hope you keep succeeding. John, let's tell us about ATAC in Arizona.
So yeah, the organization's name is Arizonans for Transparency and Accountability in Corrections, and we go by the acronym ATAC, ATAC. Our website is AZTRACCO. I think that will be put in chat.com, AZTRACCO.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and we're here. And I would say that, so if you're in Arizona, you live in Arizona, we absolutely would like you to reach out to us and give your support. But also, Arizona is a destination. I would say this also about Florida, is a destination for vacationers. Our population explodes. In the winter, where people come down here from other states. So if you're going to bring your holiday dollars down here to Arizona, you're going to bring your winter retreat dollars down here to Arizona. We ask you to bring your support to Arizona to make Arizona a better place. So whether you live in Arizona or you're visiting Arizona, we'd love for you to reach out to us and give us some support so that we can get our prisons changed and get oversight in them.
Thanks, John. Well, we have to wrap it up. We are out of time. But once again, I just am so grateful to all of our panelists today. I'm so grateful to FAMM's support staff supporting us on the technical side of this. And this video will remain on FAMM's Facebook page to watch again, to share with others. It will also be on FAMM's YouTube page, so you can share this with others again. And also, please get connected with FAMM. We are supporting these oversight efforts wherever we see them across the country. So you can visit our website at famm.org. Text FAMM to 21333 to get signed up for our text alerts. And we don't text you like crazy. We just text you when there's something important to do. But please sign up and get connected to advocates in your state and FAMM at the national level. So once again, thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.